We're doing a series all this week called Great American Heroes, and there are more of them than you may think. Certainly, there are lots of them in Kansas City, Missouri. It was lucky enough to discover hundreds of heroes just when it needed them most. July 17th, last summer, 2 aerial walkways suspended over the lobby of the Kansas City Hyatt Regency Hotel collapsed, burying hundreds of people under tons of concrete and steel. It was one of the worst hotel disasters in American history. 113 people were killed, another 186 were injured, but the casualties could have been much higher if it had not been for the work of the emergency medical teams, the police, the firemen, and countless volunteers who worked throughout the night and well into the morning to free those trapped beneath the rubble. 3 of the people who took part in that rescue mission are with us this morning. Let me introduce them to you now. Dr. Joseph Waeckerle, who is the physician in charge of the rescue and triage. We'll get into that in just a few moments at the scene. Kansas City fireman and Captain Ron Oles and Mike Trader, who's on the left of your screen there, who's the fireman. They were involved in the rescue efforts as well. Captain Oles, you were working with something called the Jaws of Life. That was, an apparatus that came in and lifted up the rubble?
Yes, it's a tool developed by the Hearst Company for rescue work.
But now that was overheated and it was operating past the point of its known stress a lot of the time when it was picking up all this rubble, right?
Right. It got so hot at times that my driver, Terry Herzog, couldn't even hold it with his gloves on.
And yet you would crawl beneath whatever it was holding to pull people out.
Well, I had faith in Terry and in my crew.
Why did you volunteer to do that rather than sending your crew in, sending one of your men in?
You can't order somebody into something like that unless you do it yourself.
Did you ever stop and pause and think, God, maybe I ought not to do this. This thing could come down on me.
There's always that thought. But it had to be done. There were people alive under there.
Is that the most dangerous situation you've ever faced?
Probably.
There was one point, as I recall, where you saw lots of people who were dead, obviously, once they lifted up the rubble. And then a kind of miracle of life appeared.
Yeah, we had lifted it and worked for several hours and had almost completed lifting the east side of the top layer. And we took another bite and lifted it up, blocked it. I crawled in and removed a body. And then this little girl, she was probably 4 or 5 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, she crawled out on her own. That was great.
It kind of give you enough strength to go on for a while?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You talked to a young boy who was trapped for quite a while, Mr. Trader.
Yes, I just had to lay on the floor down there and try to talk to him through the concrete to reassure him. At that point, that seemed to be the best thing to do, and after a certain length of time, I got emotionally involved with him, wrapped up in the scene, and stayed there for a few hours talking to him, trying to reassure him, try to pass on instructions from Dr. Joe and the men working above.
Did you have a personal identification with him before?
Well, yeah, my son Sean, same age, and that's where it came from. That's where it started at.
Dr. Waeckerle, you had lots of tough decisions to make that night, and your other physicians as well did. I mean, you had to decide who was going to live and who was going to die.
Well, yes, it was a difficult evening for everyone, but I think the important fact of the matter is that the community of Kansas City has a lot to be proud of, because everyone there responded by doing their job to the best of their ability. I'm a wee bit uncomfortable, as I expressed to you earlier, about sitting here in front of a sign that says Great American Heroes, because the Kansas City Hyatt had a number of heroes. Everybody did their job to the best of their ability, and if you had to single out a few, I would say it would be the victims and the lay people, because they weren't trained to do what we were trained and expected to do. We did our jobs. They delivered care and comforted their fellow victims in a really efficient manner throughout the whole ordeal. And those people, in my mind, were the real heroes. The community of Kansas City was really heroic in their efforts. The people who went to the blood bank, thousands of people donated blood or were willing to donate blood, and hundreds of people were there to help. And you really have to have a lot of empathy for them. You especially have to have a lot of empathy for the people inside the building during the whole procedure, because the description of the environment is beyond words what we had to work with. And I was most impressed and proud to be a part of a team that did so well.
What about, did it change your attitude about what we're all made of as a result of this experience?
It really did. It changed a lot of attitudes. It was a very interesting experience for me. I got a lot of negative feedback in certain areas, but for the most part, it proved to me that the people, at least in the community where I live, Kansas City, can care and help other people when the chips are down, when they really have to. And in today's society, that's not a common occurrence.
I know Kansas City has always been very proud of all that it has out there, but do you think it'll be an even better place to live as a result of this tragedy if you had to find a bright side to it all?
Yeah, it sure will. A lot of things have been looked at now that maybe weren't looked at right to begin with.
But we thank you all for being here with us this morning, being representative of the hundreds of heroes who were involved in that. It was a terrible tragedy, but it did give us a chance to talk about the better side of life as well.
We're strictly representative. That's
Okay. Well, I know there's a lot of modesty involved here as well, but we do want to point out that these people felt strongly that they had lots of help. We'll be talking more about American heroes all this week, and Jane will be back in just a few moments, but first this word.